Welcome, folks, to episode 83 of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show. I'm your host, Mark Hasara, and for over 24 years, I flew KC-135s, traveling all over the world, passing gas for a living. On the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, we interview some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even general aviation environments? The purpose of our show is to illustrate how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. A lot of the stories that you're going to hear, particularly today, are being told for the very first time. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show is sponsored by Wall Pilot, aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. See the 4-foot KC-135 behind me? That's a Wall Pilot print. These are custom 4, 6, and 8-foot detailed aircraft on vinyl that you can peel off and stick to any flat surface. We've done a 30-footer for one guy too. They're so detailed you can even read the stenciling on the missiles, and they're exhaustively researched and meticulously drawn. I think there's about 147 ready to print famous aircraft from World War II all the way up to 5th gen fighters. If you want, we can also do custom work. If there's a favorite airplane of yours that you want with your name on it, a certain tail number, unit, or weapons load, we can do that too. I just downloaded 415 new line drawings that we can fill in, everything from Newport 17s all the way up to SU 57s. Go to wallpilot.com and order a couple of the ready to print, or send us a form that we have on the website that we can do a custom for you. On today's show, we have another MiG killer. John Markle lives here in Utah. Unfortunately, his video didn't work, but his audio worked just fine. And he's going to talk to us about killing MiGs and even having to eject from his F4. So, grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in, and let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit Show with MiG killer John D. Markle. Welcome to another episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, and we have John Markle, F4 pilot from Vietnam. How are you today, John?
Doing well, thank you. Good to hear your voice.
And it's great to have you on with us. John, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and particularly, how did you become interested in becoming a fighter pilot?
Well, I remember as a young kid, we're talking early 50s, well, my parents eventually had a black and white TV, a very small TV. I think a few times I'd stay up until after the news ended, and that was around 10 o'clock in Kansas in those days. And they would play the national anthem and a bunch of military stuff going across the screen, including a lot of airplanes. I think that got my attention first. Also, the fact that I think those same time frame, they were so proud to announce that how many millions of cartons of cigarettes were being sent to the troops. That's a long, long time ago. Things have changed since those days. Okay, anyway,
Sure
but the other fact that also near Hutchinson, Kansas, where I'm from, there was, of all things, a naval air station, naval air station in the middle of the country.
Really?
And they were flying, I believe they're P2YBs or BY, something like that, you know. I think it was a 2-engine, I'll call it maybe a light bomber in those days.
Oh,
Could have
P2V
been
Neptunes. P2V
yeah,
Neptunes.
there you go. There you go. There you go.
Maritime patrol and sub hunting.
Yeah. Hutchinson Naval Air Station, of all
in
places.
Kansas.
Yeah. And so I would see those things flying around there once in a while. And then also my parents lived just north of the state fairgrounds. And they had a association of farmers, the flying farmers, would fly in probably annually, I should say, to get together and talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would be flying in on their Cessnas, whatever, and the landing strip people was just south of us. So those guys would go flying by at least once a year, maybe more. But all those things kind of got my attention. So I'd never been in an airplane, but I had interest. And then in 1969, I'm about to graduate from college, and Fort Hays State, a small college, state college in those days, now university. On Fridays, I think it was, they'd have military recruiters in the student union.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I want to be a Navy aviator pilot. But the Navy didn't have a recruiter, but the Air Force did. And so I remember talking with this fella, and he said, if you can pass the flight physical, and a very simple aptitude test, you can be a pilot.
Simple.
So
I like that. Simple.
yeah, very simple. And so I do remember I drove to Wichita McConnell Air Force Base and took a physical. And somewhere along the way, I took a aptitude test. And eventually I heard back from the Air Force recruiter that you passed the test, and we're trying to get you a class date, UPT, UPT, UTP, UTP.
Yeah, UPT, undergraduate pilot training.
Yeah, sorry. And then I also went to the draft physical in June of 1969. There was a war on, and the recruiter again was able to move me into what they called a delayed enlistment. In other words, I would have been drafted soon after my physical, but the Air Force was able to delay my enlistment to the Air Force based upon my class date.
Yes.
And that's what I did. I did the delayed enlistment in October of 1969. Was bused to OTS, Lackland Air Force Base. And the rest is kind of history, I guess.
So you go through OTS at Kurt or at Lackland.
Yes,
and,
that's correct.
And then you end up obviously at undergraduate pilot training. Where'd you go to pilot training?
Del Rio, Laughlin. Air Force Base. Yeah.
Yeah. And you come out with an F4 assignment.
Yeah. That year, I believe it was the first year that they allowed guys out of pilot training to get in the front seat of the F4. And I think we discussed earlier that I'm sure the guys that were from the academy, they graduated in the would have been about the summer of 1970, right?
Yeah.
Pilot training. And then I was about 6 months later.
Okay.
And so after pilot training, and I think there were 5 F4s on the list of airplanes you could pick. I was lucky enough to get in the top 5. And then I went to RTU at MacDill, there in Tampa area.
What a nice place to go to school, huh?
Yeah. They were flying brand new F4Es. And the instructors were highly accomplished themselves. Chuck Large. I can remember Gail Peck was my instructor.
Oh,
Later,
you're kidding.
commander of the Red Eagles.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So you see the
Yeah.
connection sometimes.
Yeah.
Just fortunate again, just fortunate. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah. And for all my listeners, Gail Peck is the guy who started the constant peg program with the
Yeah.
MiGs and at Tonopah,
Yeah.
flying MiG 17s and MiG 21s and MiG 23s later on.
Yeah.
And Colonel Peck started that program. Wow. And obviously had Vietnam experience by that time too, didn't he?
Right. The whole cadre of instructors had been Vietnam vets for sure. And in those days, Gail was not married. He had a room right next to me in the BOQ. The only difference was he was driving a very nice Corvette, of course, and I wasn't, So that tells you I had a lot to learn, right? Yeah, and I see Gail every once in a while. Yeah, he's a nice fellow, very nice gentleman. Yeah,
A great book too. Wrote a great
yeah,
book
yeah, yeah.
about his experiences and about standing up the constant peg program too.
Yep, yeah.
So what was your first base of assignment when you come out of RTU at MacDill?
Udorn, Thailand.
So you went straight to combat?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were probably, I'm going to guess there were 20 to 25 guys in front seaters, my RTU class. And of course, you got what was that, a Form 90, wasn't it? Something like that,
Yeah.
And some guys chose Europe and this kind of stuff. And some
Yeah.
guys chose other assignments. And I felt like I wanted to participate.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go straight to Udorn out of RTU.
Yeah, so I
that's
showed up
incredible.
around, it's just about Christmas of 1971. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Mike, let me think. What was Mike's last name? He's officer
Yeah.
at for the squadron, triple nickel,
Uh-huh.
Cooper,
Yeah.
Mike Cooper. And he invited us to, come to his office and sat there, and he said, "Hey, it's just like the bombing range in MacDill, you just roll in, you drop your ordnance, this kind of stuff, and blah, 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 nothing to it, I said to myself, well, okay, if that's true, how come the wing just lost 4 airplanes in the last 2 or 3 days?
Oh, wow.
And so they'd had a couple airplanes in the north area that run out of fuel, I think, all kinds of problems, But anyway,
Yeah.
that was totally different, but at least somewhat sobering, that
Yeah.
you got to pay attention here a little bit, that sort of thing. So.
Yeah. And you guys were flying both E models and D models by this time, correct?
Well, we trained to the E in the RTU, but the squadron had D models, and the triple nickel and the 13th were the two fighter squadrons at the base, and then they had one recce squadron.
Yeah.
I think that was the 14th, I think it was.
Yeah. RF4s.
And so I actually got my first my dollar ride at Udorn in a recce bird, just to go out and fly around, see what it looked like, how to get in the back to base, this sort of thing. And then he had about a 10 sortie checkout in the whole area to work some simple, reasonably safe targets, that sort of thing. And maybe another handful of sorties before you're supposed to fly at night. And then off you go. So that first month, maybe 6 weeks, were practice, if you will.
Yeah.
And then by mid-January, were flying pretty much anything they offered. And in those days, there was really only uh, the barrel roll, northern Laos, and then Steel Tiger, the southern part.
Yeah.
We didn't fly anything to the north. We didn't fly really into Vietnam for the first handful of months. And then, of course, when the spring TED and everything else happened, well, it's well documented that things changed for sure.
Dramatically.
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
Dramatically.
Yeah. And so I was just a normal, and I still am, just a normal lieutenant, if you will, just trying to get on the schedule to fly. Some of those guys I still stay in touch with. I've just seen a handful of them just recently. Greg Hansen, Marty Cabato, Frank Scoggins, those kind of guys were lieutenants themselves, and we were all just trying to get on the schedule. And everybody had a good job, and that's where we were.
But your squadron had some famous fighter pilots in it. And, as you mentioned, things are starting to ramp up in June because you start Operation Linebacker 1 and Linebacker 2, obviously over Christmas. So, you had John Madden, Chuck Debellevue, Steve Ritchie, Roger Locker, Bob Lodge and Roger Locker. That's an incredible group of flying people that fighter aces that you're flying with.
Yeah, you look at the guys at that wing. I think Charles Gabriel was the wing commander, Colonel.
Oh, that's right, I forgot. Future Chief of Staff of the Air Force.
Yeah. Oh gosh, who was the squadron commander?
Was it Bailey?
I'm sorry.
Was it Bailey?
No. Oh gosh. Joe Killinger was the wing commander, the squadron commander. Wayne Fry was involved also, but Mike Cooper was the ops officer, like I said, and Steve Ritchie was not there initially. Dad was even later. So I'm struggling here a little bit to remember some of the senior guys, if you will, in that squadron. But it all came together around, let's say, mid-March, to late March is when Steve Ritchie showed up. Madden followed later. Good group.
Yeah, and because that's an incredible group of flyers and you got to fly with these guys at, like you said, you're a first lieutenant, and then of course, like you mentioned, things got really, really intense that summer when the linebacker operation started. Okay. And John, everybody has read articles about this, and I want to have you give your recollections of the 10th of May, 1972. And that's the day I believe you got your MiG kill. So talk about that for just a moment, because you mentioned to me when I talked to you on the phone, you had an unusual weapons load when you went up that day.
Well, as you look back, the war was not extended, but it'd been going on for quite a while, and you don't even think about that sort of things when you're young, and this sort of thing was about how the munitions got there and how they got contracts to get the munitions, and why they wanted to have them, that sort of thing. But anyway, so it wasn't unusual to see pretty limited loads on our airplanes. Although if you have a air-to-ground mission, it would normally be, say, 12 slick 500-pound bombs.
Which is a lot of bombs.
Yeah.
That's a lot of bombs.
And or a mix of 500 pounds to maybe some CBUs. They just introduced the guided 2,000-pound bombs.
Yeah, the paveway ones.
Yeah, and because of the, I think it was tanks primarily in the Plain des Jars area, they were trying to counter that. Anyway, so, but the little bit of air-to-air we even talked about, because there was nothing going on except Bob Lodge and Roger Locker on these night, I call them MiG cap missions, about 4 hours. I think I mentioned earlier that there were two ships out each night. The 13th Squadron had 2, and the Triple Nickel had 2. And somewhere along the way, in an attempt to try to get to flying time, I was thrilled I got a chance to fly on one of those longer missions because every hour counted. Kind of like that. And then I don't know whether I did something reasonably well that Bob Lodge kind of liked. I don't know. We never talked about that sort of thing. And then eventually he got involved in some of the reaction, oh gosh, what was the name of it? Anyway, it'd be a small Google of airplanes, F4s, F105s, that kind of stuff, right? For certain targets. And I got on the schedule with him again. Although, as I mentioned earlier, I think in our phone conversation we were not formed crews at all. You flew with the backseater, might not see him for another month. And of the 10 flights between, you flew with 8 other people. We were not formed crews at all. And then when things started after April, and we were going to go back to the north, then when I was on a schedule for one of the early flights, like May the 10th, I was on Bob's wing. And of course, I was nervous that night before. In the morning, we were going to briefing, probably 4 a.m, that kind of stuff. But anyway, we just saddled up, if you will. And I think the foursome of the 4-ship was Bob, myself, Steve Ritchie, and Tommy Fiesel. And again, the tactics, if you will, in the days were the formation was what's that called? Something 4, fluid 4. I think
fluid
it
was
fluid 4. And 1 and 3 were the shooters primarily, that kind of stuff, and were loaded the same way, So on May the 10th, as you mentioned earlier, that my weapon load was 2 AIM 7s I believe they were both in the rear wells. And then I had 1, maybe 2 ECM pods in the front well or wells. And then I had a AIM 4 in one of the wing
hard.
And as we commented earlier, I'm not sure I had seen a AIM 4 before, and I hadn't seen one since. But we did agree that we were told they were primarily ADC missiles. They required
Air Defense Command,
radar signature, I think, to guide the seeker head. Yeah. So that was of course, nobody had a gun because we were flying D models, and we couldn't afford to have the gun pod in the center line because we had to have fuel.
Okay.
And so that was the normal. The normal operation was I launched 4 airplanes with a ground spare.
Mm-hmm.
I get the tanker, getting the border area, pickle off the center
Yeah.
tank, and off you go. I think the tactics for the day were we're going to be real low level, trying to stay within the hills to try to protect from radar contact by the North Vietnamese radar. Using Red Crown, the ship and the Navy ship in the Gulf as updates on activity. And we'd pop up every once in a while just to get radio contact to make sure what's going on. And it's just one of those days where they rarely ever got anybody up. They got a lot of people up that day. It was a busy day. So,
Yeah. A lot of people, a lot of Vietnamese MiGs flying that day.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to go back for just a second. You know, Tommy Fiesel was flying forward with Doc Pettit, and he didn't have a radar. So he had nothing as an ordnance. So it's just a space, to make up the formation. So that's what we did.
So his radar was trash. He took off.
And he didn't have a radar. So
the radar
didn't have a radar. So we had no AIM-7 capability, and he probably didn't have I'm sure he didn't have anything more than I had as far as a heat seeker. So he had nothing, So he was just support. So
see,
he did
John,
not show.
I have never read that. I'd never read that your 4-ship OYSTER Flight, which a lot has been written about your 4-ship and what happened during this engagement that you guys had, and that's when you said you had 2 Sparrows and Falcons. That was the first I'd ever heard that, and I thought, ooh, going downtown with 2 Sparrows and Falcon missiles that are not really maneuverable. They're not made for hitting fighter targets. I thought, wow, that's incredible.
Well, at the same time, as number 2, I wouldn't expect it necessarily to be the shooter. I understand that a little bit. So
yeah. Hey, and John, something I want you to mention to our listeners. There was a piece of equipment that some of your F4Ds had at that time period. It was called Combat Tree. Can you talk about that for just a few moments?
Okay. Yes. We had, in our flight, we had 3 of the airplanes had Combat Tree, which the backseater, using the radar, had some capability to pick out who's who in a merge, or at least identify who the bad guys might be.
Yes.
And so that's how we could fire beyond visual range. Had no capability before that equipment, and I don't know when that actually showed up. I think it's sometime in late 71, early 72 timeframe. Yeah. And we probably had, I'm going to guess, the wing, we probably had about 8 of those airplanes. If we had 2 squadrons, around 50 airplanes. So we happened to have 3 on that flight, and my airplane had Combat Tree.
Oh, so you were flying a Combat Tree airplane?
Yeah, Steve Eves was my backseater, and so Steve and Roger did a nice job of picking out what they were seeing, and did a nice job of selecting who's going to do what. And Chuck Debellevue was getting the same information in Steve's airplane. So we did a pretty good job for a really pretty simple setup. It turned out to be, but that was an advantage, obviously.
Yeah, and that was like one of the very first technology breaks in air-to-air combat, because that was reading the MiG's IFF, and you could tell right away, hey,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've heard it called, John, it's like grass on the radar screen, he's got
Yeah.
grass or something like that on the radar screen. And that was how you would know, hey,
Yeah.
he's squawking MiG. He's squawking
Yeah.
MiG.
Yeah. I think so. If the backseater was picking up targets,
Mm-hmm.
and that the screen is, top to bottom. At the
Yeah.
bottom of the screen, I believe, is where the grass was,
Ah,
in line with
okay.
that column, if you will, of information or data, returning data. Um, so he could figure out who's who. Now, I don't know how good the um, identity. Uh, these airplanes were pretty well spread out. They're about a mile apart, as I
Yeah.
recall, and
Yeah.
so it probably wasn't too challenging for everybody, but it still gave us a capability to shoot early. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And have some reasonable confidence that you're what you were shooting at
Oh,
the same
absolutely.
time.
In fact, I must say that once Bob made the call that we're going to go engage these guys, and uh, Red Crown was confirming everything.
Mhm.
Here we go. We push up the speed, and we're going from probably, I don't know, 3,000 feet altitude to up to about 15, where the engagement was going to take place. Uh, as I recall, it's a pretty damn nice day. Sunny, might have been some clouds around. Obviously, I can't remember that now,
Yeah.
but it was not stormy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And uh, uh, when I heard from Steve, he's my backseater, about the contacts, everything else. Now, of course, I'm just flying off of Bob's wing,
Mhm.
and eventually, I see we've got a contact. We're locked up. I see we got a steering circle thing, they called it.
Yeah.
Got real big, and we're kind of hard of the whole damn envelope.
Yeah.
By that time, Bob had shot. So I actually saw a missile launch, that kind of
Uh-huh.
stuff. Uh,
That must have been exciting to see.
well, there you go. And then my time, and I let go two. In those days, we're supposed to shoot two,
Mhm.
in sequence.
Yeah.
And the first missile I never saw. I think it just came off the rail and got nowhere. It was just a dud.
Yeah.
And then the second missile, what of us, probably about 20 to 30 seconds between launches, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, let it go. And you sit there, what the hell? I don't see anything go by. Then all of a sudden, here comes this train going by. It is pretty impressive. It is pretty impressive. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, you're in the contrail, if you will, of the missile, and kind of not foggy, but
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden, I see the damn missile turning pretty hard right. I know the target's coming from the left. So I'm thinking, whoa, what the hell? So I'm not sure what's going to happen for a second.
Yeah.
And then I realized eventually that missile is pulling some lead for
Mhm.
that intercept. And all of a sudden it starts turning back, and I'm looking up in this beautiful sunny day,
Yeah.
and I see the contrail, that missile starts climbing and turning to the left. There, all of a sudden I start to see that little shiny target,
Yeah.
and boom, all of a sudden things happen. But I must say that I'd never fired a missile, in training or anything else. And all of a sudden you let that thing go, and it gets your attention. And I think one thing is really important for this, if you call a lesson,
Yeah.
your focus is so I'll put this, you're so focused
Yeah.
when you let that weapon go.
Yeah.
I couldn't have told you anything else going on except that missile and this airplane I'm in.
Uh-huh.
You lost total
Yeah.
contact of kind of what you're thinking. I think that's a lesson to be learned, whether it's in a cockpit or not, but just lesson learned that when you actually see a air-to-air missile do its thing, and then all of a sudden, either works or doesn't work, and now the world is back around you, you got to refocus to do what the hell you're doing.
That's a great lesson, John. That's a
I mean,
great
it's
lesson
just,
because your concentration, like you just said, you saw exactly what that missile was doing. Hey, it's going right now, it's going left, now it's going up, and you're concentrating so much on where is that thing going? What's it going to do? And then it hits the MiG,
yeah,
and if I remember right, yours was a MiG-21 kill.
yeah, that's
And it
good.
hits that shiny MiG-21. You like go, whoa.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. There's elation, no doubt about it. Um, uh, Pretty much hit the MiG in the right wing root,
Hmm.
blew off the right wing, basically.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I had nothing else to worry about except what the hell we're doing now.
Yeah.
And we just started an easy right turn.
Hmm.
I'm not sure why at the time,
Yeah.
and but I think that's a good point for everybody that uh, um, first of all, everybody flying tactical fighters should have the capability to fire one of their missiles. I can't tell you what kind they got anymore. A
Yeah.
training missile, obviously, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Get a chance to do that
Yeah.
if you're gonna, you know, and therefore it's not brand new when it's time to fire the damn thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so other than that, if we want to continue, engagement uh, went
Yeah.
on for just a bit. When we started this easy right turn, I felt like we were climbing slightly.
Hmm.
So I'd say we're the 15 to 20,000 foot
Yeah.
altitude. Um, and we probably have turned, I don't know, 60 to 90 degrees. And all of a sudden I saw two MiG-19s. I didn't know they're MiG-19s at first. I just saw two airplanes go over the top of me.
Hmm.
And they were both in a real hard right turn. You could see the condensation off the wings and everything else. And then I realized MiG-19, so those, I would say, pretty damn big
Yeah.
wing fences on the
Yeah. Yeah. Really big.
yeah,
The really big fences on the farmer's wings. They're
yeah,
they're very
yeah,
prominent, aren't they?
yeah. Now I never saw another MiG in front of Bob and Roger. Never saw it.
Yeah.
Apparently there was one.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, but I made a couple radio calls to Bob. First, I was asking him to reverse against that turn of the wing, the
Hmm.
MiGs on the left of us.
Yeah.
We're still on a easy right turn.
Hmm.
Anyway, but no response. And eventually, I made a comment on the radio, and also Steve Eves, my backseater, he even we got on the radio and said, "Bob, they're shooting at you. They're shooting at you." And I could see the lead MiG was firing. I could see condensation along the leading edge of the wing where the gun was.
Yeah.
Or
And
gun.
that's a big cannon too. That's a
Yeah,
37
yeah,
millimeter. It's a
yeah,
big
yeah,
cannon.
yeah. And just no response again from Bob and Roger. And so eventually somebody said, "Oh, I think Steve Eves again said, you're on fire. You're on fire again." Uh, and then I said something to Steve about, I think it's time for us to get the hell out of here.
Hmm.
And I just took the airplane and made a split S.
Hmm.
Uh, and then ended up maneuver. I think I was pointed just almost at Yenbai Air Base.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see any MiGs, I believe, on the runway or taxiing, but I think I saw some in a revetment or two.
Uh-huh.
And I know I made the comment to Steve Eves that maybe I'll just fire that damn missile at the
And see
MiGs
what
on
it
the
does.
ground, you know?
And see what it does.
Yeah. And then I didn't. And I turned left to the going home heading was always 210 from that part of the world, which we did. And I'm pretty low level, I'd say 500 feet, that kind of stuff. Probably running mill power, heading 210. And within, I don't know, a couple of minutes of that heading, a MiG, I couldn't tell you if it was a 21 or 19. I think it was an 18. But anyway, a MiG turned right in front of me. Now, you'd think, well, sure, you'd know which one it was. But in my mind right now, I don't. I just can't. I don't see it. But a MiG turned right in front of me. I would say 3,000 feet, going the same direction I'm going. I called for bore sight on the radar, so I could see if I get a signature from this airplane in front of me to talk to that aim for seeker head. Anyway, and it got to go, and it lose contact. Anyway, and so the MiG started doing a little easy right and left turns. Whether he was looking anybody behind him or what, I don't know. But I stayed around 3,000 to 2,000 feet behind him. And if I ever tried, every time I'd try to lock up with the radar, I'd get a reticle for the range, that kind of stuff, on the HUD. And so eventually I could never get a good lockup, and I couldn't get any tone other than a little bit. Of course, part of it's your low level also, in those kind of missiles in those days. And then eventually when he made a reasonably hard, not medium-sized right turn, I made a left turn just to give more distance and just kept going west until we eventually regrouped, if you will, at the tanker. And by that time, the shock is starting to register with us exactly what's happened. And we've lost Bob, and we thought Roger at the same time. And so the flight had rejoined, if you will, the tanker, and then went home for debrief, that kind of stuff.
And that must have been an emotional time, because Bob Lodge was your weapons officer, and he was a brilliant tactician. Everything I've ever read said Bob was probably one of the best tacticians, in the Air Force at the time. And Roger was probably one of the best backseaters. And so you guys joined the tanker as a 3-ship, and it's like, well, we got missiles gone. We shot down MiGs, but we lost a really brilliant fighter pilot today.
Yeah, that was a tough day. It's difficult to either describe or understand at the time. We had lost squadron members earlier in missions, not right in front of my face, so that makes a difference. But I can't tell you we flew the next day, but probably within the next day or two, we're out there again, and Steve Ritchie's going to have the lead of this formation, if you will, So there's a transition, obviously. Of course, we had no idea that Roger was on the ground, wandering around, this kind of stuff, But we all knew that if we'd flown with Bob before, he'd always brief that, first of all, his point was the F4 is not known to just explode.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can write it if it's beat up.
Yeah.
But try to get feet wet. And he'd always comment that I'm not going to be a POW. That was it, you know.
Mhm.
And so turns out that was true.
Yeah.
Tough day for everybody, but we regrouped and off we went, you know. So
And so just Roger's in the jungle for 23 days. What was it like when you found out, you know, somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody's talking to him and they go, hey guys, come and get me.
yeah, I think it was an early weather recce, a couple F4s from Udorn had gone up, and it might have been Joe Burley was the pilot of one of the planes, and everybody carried very small or recorders, cassette recorders.
Yeah.
And we put them in the map box or whatever, that kind of stuff, you know, strapped them down and put the earpiece in your helmet earpiece area. And so we'd record our missions. And actually I have in my safe, I have a recording of that day, May 10, 1972, in my safe.
Wow.
Anyway.
I did not know that, John.
Yeah, yeah.
You guys would fly with recorders and record the missions.
Yeah, of course, the airplane didn't have the capability. We just made them, you know.
Yeah.
And so, let's see, I lost my thought for a second. Just to help me out a little.
So you're recording the May 10th mission, but the RF4 guys are obviously recording theirs, and they're the guys that hear Rogers on the ground.
I think when somebody came back to debrief that morning, early morning mission, during the debrief, they were listening to the debrief with a recorder, and they said, "Hey, wait a second, do that again. Let me hear that again." You know, it sounded like Roger's voice. And so I remember the day that they found me and said, "Come to Intel." And I listened to this recording. They said, "Does that sound like Roger?" I said, "Yeah, that sure as hell is Roger," you know. And then that changed the whole dynamics, if you will, for the next handful of days to get him out of there, you know. Yeah.
We don't leave anybody behind, do we?
Yeah,
do we,
big
John?
time story.
We don't leave anybody behind.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, first of all, he did a hell of a job, you know, just to survive. And I think his plan was he's going to walk 90 miles to some other area of the world, but he got about 5 miles, something like that, whatever it was, you know, in those 20 days.
He didn't get very far.
Pretty tough. But he got some help. And what was the helicopter's name? Dale? Somebody picked him up. Air Force Cross, I believe.
Oh, and they're right on the outskirts of Hanoi when they do this.
Yeah, I think we were probably, I would say we're probably northwest of Hanoi, probably 20 miles or 25 miles at the most, something like that, where this all happened. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And to all my listeners out there, you can read about Roger's pickup, and it's a phenomenal story, because General Voigt calls everything off, and you guys go up there with like 150 planes just to get one guy.
Yeah.
All right. And that's why I say we will not leave anyone behind.
Yeah.
You know,
if you can possibly do it, they do it. I'll put that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I'll give an example. How they helped me 10 days later.
Go ahead. I'd love to hear this story. You didn't tell me this story.
Your eyes. I can see in your eyes. You're saying, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Okay, I'm on the ground on May 20th, about 30 miles northwest of Hanoi.
You've been shot down?
Yeah.
By a MiG or a SAM?
MiG.
Oh.
I wouldn't say anything hit my airplane. Now this gets kind of crazy, you know, but
Yeah. Welcome to combat, huh, John?
well, I was on Steve Ritchie's wing.
Uh-huh.
Mike Cooper is the number 3. Greg Hanson's number 4.
Uh-huh.
I'm number 2. And all I hear is we're in a pretty good hard turn, left turn. And Steve said, John, brake left, which I did. I don't think anything hit the airplane. I never felt anything, I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
So in this hard turn, and I make it even harder,
Yeah.
and a slightly downhill vector, if you will.
Yeah.
I realize that I'm pretty much vertical down, and I start pulling from the horizon towards the horizon, and I get a little wing rock, which I think is in the F4, I believe was a stall, like stall, like wing stock, I tell you, this kind of stuff. So you got to ease off a little bit, and so there's some clouds. In and out, and I just look at the attitude indicator again. I'm about 60 degrees down. I'm going 400 some knots. I'm out of burner. I'm in idle trying to, you know. And something tells me you may not get out of this dive.
Oh my gosh.
Now I know that the terrain in that area is maybe 3,000 feet the most.
Yeah.
Hilly.
Yeah.
And so I made the command decision, if you will, told Jim Williams something about we're getting out now. And of course, when I pull the handle, he has no choice.
Yeah.
And so I punched us out of the airplane. We're probably, I don't know, when I awaken my eyes or wake up, I look up and I see a parachute above mine, which kind of made sense of the sequence.
Yeah.
So it's just since the vector was down to start with. And next thing I know, I'm in the trees. And so eventually I got out of the tree, started to move a ways. It was a hillside, jungle-like, obviously. And I found a bunch of banana plants that I crawled under. And prior to that, during the descent of the parachute, I don't know if I did, but I think Jim did for sure. Somebody opened up the antenna for survival radio just to give them a beep.
Yeah.
And then off. And eventually the whole day goes on where we get Sandies, we get helicopter.
Yeah. A1 Sky Raiders and the Helos come in, the H3s.
And the Sandies do a real nice job and everything else. But eventually there's one shot. I couldn't tell you if it was a rifle, handgun. I'm not that accomplished for that. There's just one shot. Kind of flinched when I heard that. But by that time, I heard Jim say that there's people around him.
Oh no.
And I had not seen anyone around me. I'd heard people wandering around, but I'd never seen anyone. And so the bottom line is I get picked up and Jim is in jail for about 10 months.
Oh, geez.
May until July timeframe.
Yeah. So the Sandies and the Helos come in and pick you out of the
yeah, they did. Yeah.
Out of the jungle.
That's a whole nother story, if you will. That
Well, how long were you on the ground, John?
About 6 hours. about 6 hours. It's about noon when this all happened. In that time of that part of the world, sunsets about 6 to 6, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the Sandys did a real nice job of identifying what was going on, supporting the helicopters. Helicopters are, and the Sandys were out of NKP.
Yeah.
Although I think this helicopter might have been a remote site.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I was very fortunate. So I got a ride to NKP that night, and stayed a couple nights at the hotel, the hospital, with really no injuries. That was the flight surgeon kept looking at me, said, "You sure there's nothing wrong with you? You don't hurt anything?" He said, "You don't eject normally from 400 knots and not get beat up a little bit, But I just was fortunate again in the damn Martin Baker seat.
Yeah.
It worked as it should have, So very fortunate again. And the good news is on this story is that Jim Williams was returned.
Yeah.
Eventually went to pilot training himself, and retired from the Air Force. So yeah.
I think I told you, John, my uncle, Bob Jeffrey, got shot down 4 days before Christmas in 1965. Was picked up as soon as he hit the ground. But his backseater didn't make it out.
Yeah.
Young lieutenant. He'd only been married a month.
Yeah.
The backseater. We went to the 25th Vietnam POW reunion at Ross Perot's ranch, back a long time ago. It's been 50 years now. They just had their 50th anniversary. And Robert was really lucky because he was flying an F4C and it had the older Martin Baker chair in it. Okay. His back is all messed up because of getting out of the jet, but he's alive and was there for 7 years as a POW, his first combat mission.
Real quick, if you don't mind, if you go back to when we picked Roger up, how thrilling that was, first of all, for all of us, certainly for him, but for the rest of us.
Yeah.
And then the fact that I actually could confirm that he and Roger heard my radio calls.
Yeah.
They chose not to either do what I was suggesting,
Yeah.
But
and they had just shot down a MiG, didn't they? They had just shot down, if I remember right, they had just shot down a MiG and were about to shoot down another one.
Yes, that's correct.
When he got hit.
That is correct. Now that's the MiG I never saw. I never saw that MiG. I'm so focused on Roger and then the other two airplanes.
Yeah.
I never saw. There's something about they were too damn close. They were trying to back up from that airplane because they were inside range to shoot.
Oh yeah.
Missiles, kind of stuff.
Okay.
But my point is that when I listened to that tape that I have, that just confirmed that I actually did push the radio button and said something, and it went through the air. And the fact that Roger eventually said, "Yeah, we heard that. We just never did anything. We didn't do what you said." So, okay, that made me feel a little better, for that.
Yeah. But okay, lead. I was trying to warn you.
Yeah, well, anyway, it's just one of those days. In fact, if you look at that, if you have a leading sight in a gun, and you need that lead. You need that airplane to turn slightly.
Yeah.
The last thing you want the guys to just straighten out, just go. Okay. And so if we'd done anything other than what we did, we probably did a little better shape. But it didn't work out that way. So it's unfortunate.
Are there any other missions that stand out in your mind during the time period? I'm assuming you were there the 1 year that most people were there, and because again, John, this is where things are really ramping up in May and June and July, and then obviously there's a short stand down, and then the linebacker two during Christmas, December of 72. I mean, they were just pounding the North Vietnamese.
Yeah, by that time, I was pretty much out of the action. Kind of throttled down, if you will, for the flights you're going to fly. I think I probably left just before Christmas of 72. Yeah. But also when Steve had such success and eventually left the wing, then John Madden came in to overlap, if you will, a bit. And then by that time, John had a little bit different idea. He went to form crews. Found the right people, to make those crews. And they were pretty tough, to say the least, So that was an improvement of what we were doing before.
So when you leave Udorn, where do you go from there?
Well, my next assignment is Clark Air Base.
Great assignment.
Very good assignment. Good group there. That was the 523rd Squadron, which had just left probably 2 months ago to come back from Udorn to Clark to go home, And so, but that assignment was really good. We didn't have any airplanes to start with because they'd taken the D models, the 523rd were flying to I think the Koreans, I believe. And then we started getting, again, D models, but a little newer D models. And eventually we got ramped up to, we could all mission capability, that kind of stuff. And then we picked up a TDY commitment at Taiwan. So we had 24 airplanes or 25, whatever it was, and we had half the squadron wings or airplanes were at Taiwan. CCK, excuse me. CCK, Taiwan. And we had a 2 airplane alert commitment at Tainan, Taiwan, the southern part of the island. And so that squadron, well, you talk about a squadron had some pretty good talent.
Dan Cherry.
No, he wasn't in that squadron at the time that I know of, anyway.
Okay.
Now, here's the 4 flight commanders, as I recall. Dick Corbin is the squadron commander. Ivy McCoy is the ops officer. Probably Chuck Large was probably the wing commander or squadron commander. Flight commander. Pardon me. Arnie Morrow, Glenn Prophet, and probably Big Newton. But I'm saying we ended up with 4 guys or 5 guys.
4-star generals.
One became 4-star Fig. Glenn was 2-star when he was killed in an accident. It was very talented squadron.
Prophet was a general. Wow.
Artie Morrow was had the most number of airplanes, hours, I believe, in the F4. 20 years ago, whatever, that kind of stuff. Because he was anyway, so it was a very highland. Also one of the guys that left in June of 74, let's say, to Nellis, Joe Bob Phillips. You don't know that name. He became a legend of his own in the F-16.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty good talented group of guys there for sure,
Oh, yeah, you did.
What was difficult about that squadron real quick is when we split the squadron pretty much half in half, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
So you do 3 weeks in Taiwan and
Yeah.
the 3 weeks back to Clark. And by the time you mix in all the leaves and wives and everything else,
Yeah.
families, it was just unfortunate because we had a real good group, but it just kind of split that whole damn group.
Yeah.
That I don't feel very too close to the whole group
Yeah.
because I didn't see them hardly for a year and a half.
Yeah. Because you guys are scattered all over everywhere.
Yeah. That's unfortunate because I see they have reunions occasionally, that kind of stuff. They got a real good group. They really got a good group.
Yeah. Hey, John, I want to ask you a personal question. How did you meet your wife?
We were both flying for Delta Airlines.
Oh,
Yeah. And I just gotten into out of pilot training at Delta in, let's say, late November of 79.
yeah.
Early December 79. Yeah. And Mary Jane happened to be on the first flight that I'm on as a flight engineer.
Uh-huh.
And we met, and then we didn't actually see each other for about 6 years. But I remember her, and then Delta had a company magazine that every monthly. And so certain articles, I'd see her name, maybe a photo, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I just remembered her,
Yeah.
Cute little lady, this kind of stuff, and perky, very active, this kind of stuff. And so it was most of 7 years later that we re-met, if we will, and eventually we were married. So, yeah.
How long have you guys been married now?
I'm supposed to know that, right? 86 is 14, make it 37 years.
Yeah.
37 going to 38. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, but I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
There's a handful of times I've been real fortunate today in an airplane also.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
Mary Jane.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you were flying with Delta, what airframes did you fly?
I started at 727, flight engineer for only 7 years, 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And then eventually flew co-pilot of the 727, 1011, 757, 767, and then flew captain for 5 years on the 775, 76. So I was fortunate there again,
Yeah.
So, good job. Really good job. Enjoyed that.
Well, and I interviewed a guy last week who was on L-1011s, and he goes, Mark, that thing was really fast. He says it carried a lot of gas, and it was a pretty quick airplane for such a big airplane too. He said he really enjoyed his time flying with Delta on L-1011s, and
yeah. As I think that airplane felt pretty comfortable about 0.86, I think it was.
That's what he was saying. Yeah. It was 0.86, 0.87 or something like that. He says, because he says we could go from LA to Boston and get there like 4 hours and 12 minutes or something crazy.
Yeah.
He
very
loved
comfortable
flying.
airplane, very nice.
Yeah, he loved flying that airplane.
Yeah.
And my mom has a very dear friend, and her husband flew L-1011s as a captain for a long time out of Atlanta. His name was Jimmy Wright. And he used to say how he loved flying on the Lockheed L-1011 with those big RB-211 engines, and just loved that airplane.
Yeah. Good one.
And I've actually flown on one, on a Delta L-1011 actually. Okay. Which is another story for another time. Anyway.
In those days, we used that airplane from Salt Lake either to LA or San Diego, then on to Honolulu, and then back, that kind of stuff. So that was my normal stuff.
Oh, was
Yeah.
that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So why'd you retire here to Utah? You just stayed here in Utah because this was your home base for flying out of Salt Lake?
Yeah, when Mary Jane and I were married in '86, we were both either in Boston or Miami, back and forth, trying
Yeah.
to try to change the chase the seasons a bit,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when Delta merged, I believe it was '86 when they merged with Western,
Yeah.
and uh, the pilot's contract
Mhm.
couldn't let us mix those senior lists for a couple of
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
and uh, and then we always wanted to live in the West. Um, the other base available in Delta was Portland, Oregon,
Hmm.
which was a real senior base.
Oh,
So I couldn't
beautiful.
get there as far as seniority.
Yeah.
Uh,
Beautiful place.
and so eventually I could transfer in, let's say, the summer of '88
Hmm.
to Salt Lake co-pilot seat on the 727.
Uh-huh.
And so we actually found property here in this area and
Yeah.
also in Pinedale, Wyoming. I think I mentioned,
Yeah.
and so we kind of go back and forth, and we just really enjoy the West, the Mountain
Yeah.
West. Yeah, very nice. So,
Yeah. And my wife's family's from here, and
mhm,
she
mhm,
grew up here. She grew up here
mhm.
in Sandy, about 8, 10 minutes from where I'm sitting.
Yeah,
And I just love it here. So
been pretty busy lately. We kind of get discovered.
yeah.
But
Well, I'm a member of the River Rats. I'm a river rat like you are, and that's how I found you, and
yeah,
I and
okay,
I and I saw that you lived here in Utah, and I said, "Oh, I
yeah,
got to talk to him." And
yeah,
and what you and I really need to do is meet at the Hill Air Force Base Museum,
yeah.
okay?
You mentioned that they're
And the new hangar that they have there, John. It's gorgeous. And they're taking a lot of the airplanes from outside, they're putting them inside, and as you well know, Hill used to be the depot for F4, so they've got a couple of them in there. They got a C model, an
right.
RF, they got an RFE in there, and some other famous airplanes. But yeah, you and I need to meet there sometime. And they have a speaking program there, John. You'd be one of those people they would love to have come and speak, stand in front of the F4 and go, okay, well, here's what
Oh,
I
the
did with
museum.
this
Yeah.
airplane. Here's what I did with this airplane. And if I remember right, the F4 is armed with AIM-9s, AIM-7s, and 750-pound bombs. You know,
Oh,
that those are big bombs, John. Well, and you mentioned
yeah.
earlier, John, cluster bombs, the CBU-52s. Those are big bombs,
Oh, yeah. Pretty good size. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And hey, talk a little bit about these night missions that you would fly, because I understand that there was like road reconnaissance missions, and then of course you guys would fly MiG-cap for the AC-130s. But did you do any
Right.
of these road reconnaissance missions that because they carried some really unusual loads with 500-pound bombs and cluster bombs and everything on the jets when they were doing this? Can you talk about those for a few moments?
Well, I don't, the ones I remember at night with Ududorn, other than the MiG cap, which
Yeah,
I was normally flying radar trail a mile or
yeah,
so behind Bob Lodge.
yeah.
Um, but the night missions, as far as air to ground,
Mhm.
many times we were escorting, if you will, supporting a C-130
Mhm.
um, gunship.
Yeah,
And so communications, the C-130 was involved, listening to the ground commander or whatever, and then relaying stuff. And then he would mark the targets based upon what the ground commander told him to
yeah.
do. And at the top of the C-130 was illuminated, it had lights on the top of it. So when he would be in a left orbit, he was always in a left orbit because all the guns were on the left side of the
Mhm.
airplane.
Yeah.
And so he's on a left orbit talking to the ground commander, and then you'd have lights on top of the wing so that those of us above the airplane could see
Yeah,
him, you know. And of course, the bad guys couldn't, you know,
yeah,
because as I recall, the airplane was pretty much painted black, you know, real black, you know, real
yeah,
dark.
yeah, it was. It's a,
Yeah.
dark airplane.
And then, so I would be sitting there in a, say, 20,000 foot or 20,000, foot orbit, elevation, altitude. Uh, uh, Normally I'd go the opposite direction because I could keep him in place all the time
Yeah,
with a countering orbit, if you will.
yeah,
And then he would mark the target using normally 20 millimeter gun, you know, uh, and then he would sparkle, if you would. He would
yeah,
make that mark on the ground, and then you're supposed to roll in, you know, and bomb that damn target. And I enjoyed the coordination. I enjoyed the challenge, if you would, because you know, if they had nothing else in that part of the world, they had great light discipline. There weren't very many lights at
yeah,
night, other
yeah,
than what you could see a camp or something like that, you know.
yeah,
But normally it was pretty damn dark, you know. And so that was the mission. I recall primarily uh, hard bombs.
yeah.
I don't think we did too many CBUs with
Mhm.
the C-130, but maybe I can't remember that part of it. But I did enjoy the job as far as the. I think we were normally a threesome, a flight
Mhm.
flight of three, and you'd have somebody on the station all the time, somebody either coming or going, another guy in the tanker, because we had
Yeah,
support for everything. So it's
yeah,
probably about a 3 hour, 3.5 hour mission, you
yeah.
know. So I guess I gravitated that kind of stuff where you get more flying time. Yeah. Now, you know, when you roll in at night using a manual bombing system, I'm not sure exactly how accurate the bombs were. You know, we did the
Yeah,
best we could,
yeah,
but that so
yeah. And you guys are flying without night vision goggles like we have now.
no,
I
no,
mean,
no, no.
the night vision systems that we have now are just phenomenal.
I bet, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I've actually had on my head the F-35 uh, helmet
Oh wow,
that has the night vision goggles built into it. Okay, so you can fly with them on or off. And John, it's freaking amazing. And the detail, John, is just amazing. The detail that you see. You know what we used to demonstrate it? We used Epcot Center at Disney World. We had this big uh, file that we'd sit you down on a bench and we put the helmet on you. And and as you know, in the F-35, you can see through the airplane because of the cameras in it.
no,
And we actually lets you fly around Epcot Center with the helmet on, and you can see, people walking around. You can tell if it's male or female. I mean, it was incredible detail. I mean, just phenomenal. And of course,
it's not.
you've got all of the sensor information in front of your eyes. You've got, heading, altitude, airspeed, all that kind of stuff. It's just an amazing helmet mounted displays are just amazing when you see them. So
It sounds like what you just described is a little advanced from what we use. We just use duct tape to block the lights of the switches. Either duct tape or uh, what's the other tape that you can,
Yeah, like
masking tape.
a masking tape.
Masking tape. Yeah, masking tape, because you can see the light through it a little bit easier, but
Yeah,
that's just to dim everything, you know.
yeah.
So
But you know what, John? Thinking about that, you're not the first person that's told me that. I remember somebody else telling me that too, who flew a lot of missions, road reconnaissance and stuff like that. And I was last week I talked to an A7 Navy A7 guy from Vietnam, and he talked about doing these road missions and recon missions. He goes, these were crazy missions. We didn't know where the bombs were going, and he talked about light discipline and everything. Amazing
In fact, I
stuff,
think
you know.
if you interviewed maybe you've talked to him, a night owl,
Yeah,
facts that
yeah.
they would be doing exactly what you described, except it'd be curious to ask him how much masking tape did you use in your cockpit
Yeah, wouldn't that be funny?
or duct tape?
One roll or two.
Yeah. That'd be a good a question to ask him real quick. So
Oh, yeah. Well, John, I'm not going to hold you up any longer. We've been going for almost an hour and a half. John Markle, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the Lessons from the Cockpit Show and sharing all of your wisdom and your stories with them. And like I said, you never told me about the shoot down the first time I heard it here, you know, and that's one of the things I always say in my introduction, you know, some of the stories you're hearing on Lessons from the Cockpit Show, you're hearing for the very first time.
I've
You
been
know?
very, very fortunate. I'll put that way. Yeah, very fortunate. So
Well, and again, John, thank you for coming on and thank you for spending some time with me today. Okay.
thank you, Mark. Enjoyed it.
Okay. All right, John, I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.
Okay. Now, you flew F-15s also, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
After
talk about
Clark,
that.
after Clark, I go to Nellis. I'm an Aggressor squadron. Then eventually I get assignment to Langley F-15,
Mhm.
the first wing. Okay. So we've taken the first F-15s and gone to Korea. I think we got 12 airplanes. Then we come down to Clark to participate in a
Hope Thunder.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And so
Great exercise, fun exercise.
then we're gonna take off. We're going to Honolulu, Hickam. And so we launch and we got tankers aboard. We're supposed to meet in Guam area, whatever, south of Guam, where it was. Anyway, and so my airplane won't pressurize. So I turn back. And a couple of days later, they get the thing fixed. And I'm a B model, a two-seater, and Doc Mullins, John David Mullins, a flight surgeon. Off we go again. So it's a dawn launch, obviously.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to meet this tanker south of Guam, as I recall. Okay. And so we see an airplane, and there we rendezvous. And of course, one of the things we did, hang around the pool, whatever we're doing, we take a almanac,
Yeah.
and you instead of the highest mountain in the world, what's the second highest mountain? This kind of stuff. Never give you the highest one, but the second one. This kind of stuff. So the tanker we're hooked up, or we're not getting fuel yet. We're just talking. And I said, let me just make sure you're the right tanker, even though we got a mission number and everything else.
Mhm.
So Doc asked him, he said, what was the runner-up horse in the 1977 Kentucky Derby, something like that, just to make sure you're the right tanker.
Yeah.
Of course, somebody came back and said, well, we got a guy that knows that, but he's sleeping right now. I said, no, that hurt us bad, to tell us you're sleeping, Anyway, so in a minute, so he came back and said, run, Dusky, run. I said, you're the right tanker, because that was the answer to the question. It's Run, Dusty, Run was the second horse in the 1977 Kentucky Derby. Anyway, okay, you get the idea. So,
Yeah.
but that's my tanker story, So the answer is Run, Dusty, Run. Yeah. While the guys are over there having a nice meal and taking a nap, we're sitting over eating our little
Box lunches,
lunch,
yeah.
and peeing in a
bag.
tube. Yeah. Right. Anyway,
Yeah,
but I'll tell you right now, we couldn't have gone along without you guys, no matter where we were, whether in Southeast Asia or going to Honolulu. Thank you. We appreciate your support. you know.
Well, like
Need
they say, John, nobody kicks ass without tanker gas. Nobody,
that.
you know, and, and think about the Vietnam missions that you guys were flying, John. I mean, you'd tank going in, tank coming out, or in bad situations where you're down or Roger's down, or, tank fight, maybe tank a couple times. And, you know, I, I struggled through pilot training, ended up at the back of the class, but I'd always wanted to fly a 707, John, ever since I was a little kid. I was 5 years old, standing in my socks on the hood of my grandpa Andy's car on Aviation Boulevard, runway 25 right and left at LAX, watching airplanes come in at 1961, 1962. Brand new 707s, brand new
Yeah.
DC-8s,
Yeah.
Lockheed Constellations, Vickers Viscounts are coming in, Lockheed Electras are coming in, all these airplanes. And that's my origin story. That's how I got started. I loved airplanes, and I loved 707s, and always dreamt about flying 707s. And I got to do it for 24 and a half years, doing the air refueling mission. And it was an air refueling mission that I absolutely loved doing, because I was flying the airplane that I'd wanted to fly ever since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And
Well, those tankers are the reason we can be global Air
Yeah.
Force. It's just like the Navy, they got ships that can make it global,
Yeah.
but we got to have tankers. So you guys did a great job. I appreciate it, so.
Well, we appreciate you guys as customers, particularly you F-15 Bubbas that are taking care of us, defending us, from whoever, and boy, isn't that a change, going from an F4 to a F-15 radar and all the bells and whistles it's got on it. I've got 3 rides in an F-15. I was stationed at Kadena for 5 years, and our wing commander there, Vietnam vet, Vietnam guy, Brigadier General Jeff Cliver, opened up all the.
Jeff. Oh yeah,
Sea Liver.
yeah. Jeff is at Nellis when I was there for sure. 74 time frame.
He is one of the best commanders, John, I ever worked with. One of the best wing commanders I ever had. Seriously. I mean, he was a no nonsense, get the job done wing commander. Okay. And he was a brigadier general when he was at the 18th wing, and he was our wing commander. Right. And as you know, he has a really rich history in the fighter community, being, flying 105s, F4s, F-15s, being part of the AIMVOL, ACEVOL tests.
Exactly. That's when I met him. Yeah. That time frame.
So were you part of the same test, the AIMVOL, ACEVOL test?
I was Aggressor at Nellis at the time, but those guys were all different, obviously. But that was what, 75, 76 time frame.
Yeah.
Jeff was in that group.
Yeah.
Tall, handsome looking guy. Damn it. Hate that guy.
He barely fit in the jet, John.
Yeah.
He had like moleskin all over his helmet because he's just big,
Yeah.
He's 6'6".
Yeah.
But again, one of the best people I've ever worked with. Seriously, he was such a great wing commander. We all loved him. And we were really sorry to see what happened to him too.
Yeah.
Because of politics. But anyway, we'll go by that. But yeah, Jeff Cliver was our wing commander when I was a young captain at Kadena.
I'll be damned. Okay.
And one of the first things he did when he became wing commander, he opened up all the cockpits, John. He said, I want everybody flying every other airplane, everybody else's airplane. I want the tanker guys flying in the F-15s. I want the F-15 guys flying in the tanker. I want the helo guys flying in the AWACS guys flying in the helo. And so if you're a pilot or a boom operator and air crew member, you could go fly in the backseat of an F-15, get in the tanker, go in the AWACS, go in the helicopters. And that was his way of saying, because he told all of us, he goes, when you hear a voice on the radio, I want you to know who it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, we had great squadron commanders at the time, Goose Giesemann, Rotor Schroeder. All of these guys were just fantastic. We had incredible leadership there when he was there at the 18th wing. And I can't say enough good things about Jeff Cliver. Matter of fact, I just heard from him not too long ago, about a month ago, through Facebook. I found him on Facebook. So, hey, tell us what it was like flying as an aggressor.
That was nice too. Again, if I had not been where I was on May the 10th, 1972,
Mhm.
I would have never gotten in the Aggressor squadron. I would have never gotten the F-15. It
Yeah.
just opened doors. I realize that now, because
Yeah.
I didn't know anybody was how I could get this stuff done,
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I leave Clark assigned to Nellis, and in those days, and maybe still this is true, that when you arrived at Nellis, the wing DO was in charge of assignments from there.
Mhm.
Even though my orders said I'm supposed to go to the 64 Squadron, Aggressor
Yeah.
Squadron,
Yeah.
I could be a lot of places, I guess,
Yeah.
But I was fortunate to go again to the 64 Squadron.
Mhm.
Ted Donna, man, my speech is not the best sometimes. And Jerry Neighbors,
Mhm.
Boss officer, and the hand guys that you learn later were flying the resources, the MiG resource, that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
And I'm just a newbie, I'm a brand new captain,
Yeah.
thinking, look how good these guys are, Anyway, and so I really felt like I got some serious training there, And then again, when all the other guys were getting assignments going to staff or whatever, from that squadron, all of a sudden I came back from a flight one day and I got a note on my desk that said, call this number if you're going to fly the F-15. I'm thinking, what? I got to be careful to even tell anybody because I might get shot in a squadron. Anyway, so I don't see a squadron. I just made that call, and I don't know who it was on the end of the phone, but I got a class date for you in September. So what was it, 76 rather.
Yeah.
And so again, just fortunate, that group of about 10 of us, or Luke, and of that group, Clay Jones, a dear friend of mine from those days.
Yeah.
So you kind of name the people that Greg Hansen and I were in day one in OTS.
Yeah.
What's that? A flight 12, I think, of our guy.
Yeah.
12 guys in a flight, right?
Yeah.
And so Greg and I are still in contact. I'm one of his daughter's godfather, Clay Jones, F-15 days, still close with Clay.
Yeah.
I'm a godfather, one of his daughters, and Clay made it pretty big in aviation industry, that kind of stuff. So it's just, again, just real fortunate, so just real fortunate. So.
Wait a minute, that Clay Jones? Clay Jones, he was the CEO of Rockwell when I was working at Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
He was an F-15 guy. Is it that same Clay Jones?
Yeah.
Oh, he was the CEO of Rockwell Collins when I was working there. Let's see, I got there in 2007 through 2014. He was the CEO of the company.
There you go. That Clay Jones.
Yeah, that Clay Jones. And I think he's still there.
No. He retired,
move?
And who's the fellow took his place was I can't think. But then eventually that company was absorbed, if you will, by one even bigger,
Yeah. Well, it got absorbed by United Technologies, and then United Technologies got absorbed by Raytheon.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's since
Clay and his wife Debbie, Clay and Debbie left Naples, Florida.
Oh, do they?
I see him occasionally, stay together, talk pretty regularly, kind of stuff, but he's a great guy.
Oh, he is. Okay. Because I came up to him and I said, when I first met him, it was at a big company party or a big picnic or anything like that. And I said, hey, may I just call you Clay? He goes, yeah, sure. You know, says, I'm just regular folk, you know, and I go, I've got 3 rides in F-15s. I know you've got more. Would you like to tell me about them? And he just beamed. Okay. He did, oh man, how did you do that? And I said, and I named off some of the people I knew, like Jeff Cliver and all these people. Of
Yeah.
course, he knew all these people too, you know, so it was fun talking to Clay Jones, you know, about our Air Force histories and our backgrounds and everything. But yeah, he was the CEO of Rockwell Collins when I was there for like 7 years. Actually, he was there for 6. And then my last year at Rockwell, God, what's the guy's name? I can picture his face, but can't remember his name. But anyway, yeah, Clay. When you said Clay Jones and F-15s, I went, oh, wait a minute. I know that Clay Jones.
Pretty common name, but at the same time, yeah. There's
Yeah.
not, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, Clay
Mhm.
was flying F4s at Kunsan, Korea,
Mhm.
in 76 timeframe. And then he was on the F-15 class at Luke, and that's how I met Clay.
Uh-huh.
And then since I've met, and I'm pretty proud that I'm going to say I've been adopted by a group of those guys for Kunsan.
Uh-huh.
They call themselves the Bros, you know.
Yeah.
And we used to alpine ski together once a year, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Some of us are still skiing, some of us aren't, that kind of thing, you know. But we just got together as a group of about 10 or 12 of us in Savannah, Georgia, just for a 4 night deal, you know, with
Yeah.
wives, that's, you know.
Yeah.
And everybody still tells stories and lies, this kind of stuff. So yeah, Clay was instrumental in that group of the guys at Kunsan in 1976. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So when you were flying with the 64th Aggressor Squadron, were you flying the F5s by that time?
Well,
Yeah,
eventually we did. We had T-38s at the first
Okay.
little bit.
Yeah.
And then when they did the ace valve stuff, they had got F5s, and then
Yeah.
we got F5s the squadron. So
Yeah.
I checked out in the F5 and probably, I don't know, probably June of about 76.
Mhm.
And then I left in the squadron in what's that, late September. So I probably had about 60 hours
Yeah.
in the F5. I never felt like I had gotten too comfortable in that airplane. It's a great little airplane, but had
Oh,
those
yeah.
maneuver flaps that
Yeah.
you could,
Yeah.
you could keep turning. All of a sudden, you'd hear the air conditioning set go, oh, or make a lot of noise. Think, what's that all about? And you look down and you say, oh, I have no knots. That's why. So I never got real comfortable of using those maneuverable flaps.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the difference.
Hey, here's a question for you too. You know, we've been talking about aggressors. You and I know what aggressors are. Tell my listeners what the 64th Aggressor Squadron is and what their mission is. Okay.
Well, in those days, it was even though it was supposed to be a MiG simulator, we actually, in most training visits, we were talking about, we were going from fluid 4 to either 2-ship,
Yeah.
like Navy tactics, more
Yeah.
that kind of
Like
stuff.
a loose deuce.
Yeah. And so that was more the training, was 2 F4s attacking a MiG simulator, if you will, you know.
Mhm.
So we spent a lot of time, we really did, in what we call a duck turn. You know, we're just in about a 3G turn, letting people fly behind us and try to sink, attack and circulate, not sorry, anyway, it couldn't get things. So you go to the training, F4 RTUs, that sort of thing, some.
Yeah.
And then you fly against, say, Seymour Johnson, which is operating wing, and you'd
Yeah.
have much more challenging challenges and flights there, that kind of thing. But when we got the F5s, it was a nice little airplane. I just, like I said, in my 60 hours, I didn't
Yeah.
feel too accomplished in that airplane,
Yeah.
But
But the airplanes were painted in Soviet bloc country.
well,
paint,
originally they
weren't
were just white T-38s what we had, but then eventually it got MiG camo kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, because see, I remember when I was going to school at BYU, we actually went to Nellis for a base visit, and they were still flying the F5Es in the squadrons, and they had the all blue schemes and
Oh, yeah,
of course
yeah.
the silver, the snake scheme, the lizard scheme, the ghost scheme, the grape scheme, and I'm a plastic model airplane builder, and I loved all the different colors and paint schemes that they had, and that's what they were for. They're emulating Russian tactics and doing some cool stuff.
There was when I was at Nellis, say about a year later, say mid 65, I guess.
Yeah.
65? No, 75. Excuse me,
Yeah.
75. When they created the 65th Squadron.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually they had a squadron, in England, right?
Yep.
And then another flight in squadron in Philippines.
Yeah.
They had 4 aggressor squadrons flying F5s, I guess, in those days.
Yeah.
And here's a fella of interest a little bit. Bobby Nidus.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Nida, excuse me. Bobby Nida. 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 Okay. In 1973, I've just left Udorn. I've come back to the States for there's a little short school of some kind. I came back to the Philippines, and Bobby Nida is supposed to be my the guy you're supposed to contact when you get there.
Yeah. Like your sponsor.
Sponsor, thank you. Sponsor.
Yeah. Your sponsor.
Okay. So I never see Bobby Nida for, I don't know, a week or 10 days, something like that. And I'm in the BX and I turn around and the guy behind me in line at the cashiers is Bobby Nida. He said, I look at his wings, his name. I said, hey, Nida, damn it,
Yeah.
you're supposed to have met me, So we became friends because we're in the same squadron, it turns out,
Yeah.
And then Bobby leaves Clark, 6 months after I do, to Nellis. He's got orders to Nellis. Okay. He's got orders to the Aggressor Squadron, just like I did. Well, the DO at Nellis looks at Bobby's resume, if you will, and he didn't have much flying time.
Yeah.
He got to Clark just in time for them to give away the airplanes.
Yeah.
Okay. So he gets shorted of flying time for probably 3 to 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
Then he punches out of a F4.
Oh no.
Out there, what's that, Straits of Taiwan, I think it is, in the water, in his back seat. Everybody's okay, but still, he got beat up a little bit, so he couldn't fly again. So in that 15-month tour at Clark, he probably flies 7 months. Okay.
Wow.
8 months at the most. So he's short of flying time when he shows up at Nellis. And so the DO doesn't send him to the Aggressor Squadron. He goes to base ops.
Oh no.
And so he's flying a T-33, wasn't it, in those days?
Yeah.
Mid-70s. Okay.
Yeah. They use the little T-33s as target.
Just to fly a little bit, and get
a
instrument check, whatever, this kind of stuff. And so eventually, Bobby Nida not only gets in the Aggressor program, he starts with the 64 Squadron. He transfers across the street to the 65th 65th Squadron. He goes to Clark, whatever that squadron number was, and he goes to England as an aggressor. He becomes the first and maybe the only totally global
Aggressor
pilot. I said to Bobby, that's a hell of a start for a guy that couldn't even get out of the base ops for about 6 months, kind of stuff. So anyway, that's a good story for Bobby. So see him every once in a while.
And they still have the 64th, they're flying F-16s now. 64th Aggressor Squadrons are still, I don't know if you know this, but now they've adopted some of the Chinese, all black. They got an all black F-16. They got a digital painted F-16.
Yeah.
And they have restood up once again the 65th. Guess what it flies? F-35s. They've got the F-35s painted in this funky 3-tone gray splinter scheme as aggressors. Yeah. Because I mean, as you well know, John, low observable aircraft are the, that's the way wars are going to be fought now. And so, there's another aggressor squadron now that is flying. They were flying F-15s. They went from F-16s to F-15s, and then they deactivated, and now they're flying F-35s.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
I think this is reasonably true now that, we used to leave the squadron, get on the airplane, check in, off we go, right?
Yeah.
And then they started talking, well, we can't fly until this satellite goes by, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I don't even think you can't even turn the radio hardly, but the fight's on.
Yeah.
It truly is,
Oh yeah. Yeah. The things that the RC-135s can do, the rivet joints, what they pick up, what our satellites pick up. And John, look at what they're doing with drones in the Ukraine-Russia war.
Oh yeah.
They're flying them 90 miles to airfields and dropping them on airplanes. You've heard.
Just remember, I look up here. You're still recording, so make sure you want to be
I am.
recording. Okay.
Well, see, a lot of this, so the great thing is, I can edit. But the Russians have lost 3 of their AWACS planes now. They lost 2 of them last week. They lost 1 to a drone that landed on the dish and went off. And then apparently the 2 of the Russian AWACS airplanes, mainstays, got picked off by SAMs last week,
Wow.
and it's a crazy different battlefield than you and I were used to, It really is. It really is. All right, brother, we went on for almost another hour.
Yeah.
Again,
I'm ready
John,
for a nap. I'm
I am too. I went to bed late and got up early today too. So, but John, next time I'm up in Ogden, my wife's brother lives up there in Layton. I'll give you a call when you come up there. I'd love to meet you and shake your hand. Okay.
Be good. Thank you.
All right.
Enjoy.
And I really enjoyed having you on, John. And again, thanks for spending time with me today on the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, John.
Got it. Thank you.
Folks, thanks for joining me today on the 83rd episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show with John Markle. This was great to hear, not only about his MiG kill, but I didn't know he'd been shot down and had to eject out of an F4 and get rescued. This is why we do this show, because we want to hear these people's stories and their lessons learned, and we want to record their legacy. This episode was brought to you by Wall Pilot, custom aviation art for the walls of your home, office, or hangar. 147 ready to print right now, from World War II fighters all the way up to 5th gen fighters. Or let us do a custom for you with your name, weapons load, tail number, unit on it. Folks, thanks for coming by the Lessons from the Cockpit Show. I really do appreciate all of the outpouring of subscribers on my YouTube channel. We're over 130 now. I just got my 100,000 subscriber award from YouTube the other day in the mail. Look forward to talking to you again next week on the Lessons from the Cockpit Show when we interview more great pilots, aircrew members, aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. Have a great week.